Welcome back to Technology Business Research Gimme 3, my opportunity to sit down with some of my colleagues and talk about some of their recent research. And I'm here today with Boz Hristov, the co-author of the Digital Transformation Insights Industrial Internet of Things report. His co-author and I, Emma Wollicott, went back and forth by email, and you can read that blog to see what we were talking about. And I wanted to expand on that here. So if you have a moment, hit pause, go read the blog, and then come back and listen to the two of us talk about it. I want to start right off the bat. The very first question: are there a particular set or some very specific either IT services vendors or consultancies that in your research around industrial Internet of Things really stood out?
Yeah, thank you, Patrick. I think when it comes to IT services vendors and consultancies, the industrial IoT space has created somewhat like a new set of outsourcing opportunities for the long run. And one particular area that we've seen investments from many of the IT services vendors includes product engineering services. That's kind of the extension into the open and kind of like the entry point for a new set of buyers, including the operational technology buyers. So in terms of the vendors that we've seen investing more heavily in that space, you have the Accenture, you have the likes of Accenture and Capgemini, some of the India-centric vendors like Infosys and HCL. Some of those have a heritage in that space as well. But also like someone like Atos, who has a very strong multi-service line portfolio offerings, has a really strong presence and a good position within the IoT in the first place ecosystem with the likes of Siemens, for example, from a partnership standpoint. So those kind of relationships are paving the way for what's kind of long-tail opportunity within the industrial IoT space. Obviously, the consultancies, when they think about the industrial IoT space, many of them first and foremost think about consulting, right? The advisory, trying to think about the road mapping, how IoT fits in the broader digital transformation programs, where the connecting tissues, how they play well. But with just consultancy on a PowerPoint deck doesn't cut anymore, right? So we start seeing the likes of like PwC has a good suite of connected solutions, trying to build that extension of their consulting capabilities with some actually tangible assets that they can bring to the customer and have a little bit more of a cohesive discussion. So, vendors from across the spectrum, obviously, all carry certain strengths. Some of them are relying on their core capabilities, others are enhancing, and third groups are expanding in the product engineering space that I mentioned, especially, Accenture's really pushing in the Industry X and Capgemini and product engineering services, as I mentioned earlier.
Right. So for the IT services vendors, it's investing in product engineering. It's having that legacy of engineering services, and then partnering with the right people already in the IoT space. Okay. So let's pivot then, not from the vendor's perspective, but I know you just wrapped up your voice of the customer research. What did the voice of the customer research say about IoT?
So we didn't ask specifically IIoT as a subsegment. We asked about IoT as an entire kind of as a space. And IoT actually ranked as the number 3 technology for buyers. As how buyers see it when it comes to purchasing technologies to support the digital transformation initiative. And that's a pretty consistent result. You have cloud number 1, cybersecurity number 3, and IoT is actually ranking really high up number 3, followed by AI and analytics, which is kind of like it's climbing up through the ranks in recent surveys. And the IoT is in general is no surprise. You need to understand, the digital transformation has really evolved. The complexity has increased, obviously, along with it, but the opportunity for connecting devices, the opportunity to generate insights from all these connecting devices is increasingly becoming more at the front and center of buyers' digital transformation spend, because cloud is cloud. It's utility, it's the backbone. You have to pay your bills to run your company. So cybersecurity kind of comes along with it and trying to be pretty much paired up, and those two kind of go hand in hand. And the next one to come is IoT and analytics and AI, because now that you have invested so much more in IoT, in infrastructure and changing your business model through cloud and so forth, Now, what can you do with the data? Where does data come from? You need to be able to make sure you have the proper connectivity layers, make sure you have all the devices that are in the right way, make sure the data is standardized. So IoT, the expectations around IoT in general are very high on the buyer side. With that being said, though, we also asked the buyers that if buyers were to put a pause on the digital transformation spend, macroeconomic headwinds, international conflicts, supply chain disruption, you name it. There's so much variables that could impact digital transformation spend. So among the buyers that feel that they may have to put a pause on digital transformation spend, IoT actually ranked the highest as a technology. They would immediately cut cost, and that's going to be the first area to go after. Our interpretation of that particular data point is that we saw a lot of a correlation between the buyers that are really somewhat immature in the digital transformation programs, that are not seeing the value of the other pieces of the cloud and cyber, that they're thinking, okay, if we continue to invest, this is where we should continue to invest in IoT and AI and analytics. But if we stop, we still make sure that we need to ensure that we have our foundation, our infrastructure is set, cloud and cyber, before we continue with IoT. So while for the most part, buyers are bullish on IoT as a market, as an opportunity area for investments, the ones that are being concerned about the next year spent around digital transformation also see it as the number one technology to be cut in terms of spending. So that's kind of have to pay attention. I guess that's the message to the vendors is, who do you service and who do you target? You have to know your buyer, where they are on the digital transformation journey, how they are moving on. They're just getting started, if they have integrated, or they may be more on the true transformation phase and looking for that next cycle of investments.
And I would guess if the buyers trust that you as the IT services vendor or the consultancy are going to bring value, they're going to spend that money, maybe not as much or as rapidly as you would want, but they're still going to spend it on digital transformation. It just may be cloud and security rather than IoT, at least in the short run.
Yeah, overall buyers are feeling well overall in terms of their spend for digital transformation, regardless of the broader sentiment for macroeconomic downturn and everything else going on. I think the pandemic had taught many of the buyers some lessons, and just they have understood that you need to have the right technologies, the right processes in place, the right partners in place, both on the services and the technology side, to how to ensure business continuity. Okay, and for the most part, majority of the buyers that we surveyed, and we surveyed buyers across the globe, they feel good about the digital transformation spend. There was just a fraction of those that we talked to that were feeling that they may have to cut back on spend, and IoT was kind of like that.
That's a real evolution. We'll have to come back maybe in the new year and have a chat about just exactly, since you started diving deep on digital transformation, how much the buyer persona has really changed.
Yeah.
Last question in this Gimme 3. When you think ahead 5 years, forget about the 5 years. Well, based on the 5 years that you know, when you think ahead, and you mentioned some vendors at the beginning like HCL, Atos, Accenture, PwC, are those going to be the most important vendors in 5 years in the IoT space, or will it be somebody else that we're not even thinking of now, or will it be somebody that has the opportunity to invest now, and you're seeing sort of the beginnings of that?
Well, 5 years is a long time.
Yeah.
Number one. Number two, I don't think it will be any particular vendor that will stand out in the next 5 years. It's going to be all about the ecosystems and how all these vendors we are seeing today, how they play with each other. And while those big vendors are important, and they'll continue to play a role in how that ecosystem shapes up, the small niche providers should not be ignored. And we hear that constantly from the buyers. They constantly bring up examples of local niche providers that are really invaluable when it comes to understanding the local culture, the local kind of flavors of the needs of the local buyers. Having that on-site support, having that knowledge or particular deep dive on a particular technology area, that's a crucial element in how the ecosystem evolves. So in the long term, I think it's going to be all about partnering differently, partnering and aligning your partnerships to a capability. Don't just say I can partner with anybody and everything, right? pick and choose your 3 partners, 5 partners, either in a geography or an industry vertical, and go deep with those partners. It could be in IoT, could be in a cybersecurity, could be in analytics, and really go deep and then really develop what's to be known for partnering with those vendors. And that's how buyers will also appreciate, from a vendor's perspective, coming to them with like, these are my partners that's how we do with those partners. That's what we're known for. So I think IoT and IoT in general would not be exclusion from that rule, essentially, the way we see the ecosystem evolving for cloud, for cyber, for AI, and everything else. And obviously a big component of that ecosystem, particularly for IoT, will be the inclusion of those OT vendors, essentially, the Bosch, the Nokia, the Siemens. You need to make sure you include those, because the IT services vendors have the tendency to think usually first about their immediate ecosystem that they have done so much work in the last 2-3 decades from an IT perspective, and they often kind of try to bring the OT vendors on their side, just thinking about their own IT and IP versus trying to meet in the middle and be more better partners.
And I think one thing you highlighted is really important is that when we talk about digital transformation, the transformation, even the top 2 priorities, the cyber and cloud, those are all very much out there, as opposed to IoT, which ends in T, and things. It's a physical thing. So if you've got a local presence and you've got local partners and you've got an ability to deliver a physical local thing, that's going to make all the difference in the world.
Very much so.
Excellent. Well, thank you, Boz. And we'll be back with another Gimme 3 as soon as we can.